A California mom is shot and killed in front of her children.
They saw their father murder their mother in front of them.
Then the alleged killer led police on what ended up being a deadly chase. We're breaking down what led up to this tragic shooting, plus the family's reaction to the cold-blooded murder. Thanks for joining us on Law and Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner. This case is truly tragic, not just because a beloved mother was killed, but the killer was allegedly her husband of more than 20 years. For Michael Rocha, the thought of living without his wife was something he reportedly couldn't bear to go through. And that thought culminated into the events of September 6th. So let me explain. On Saturday, Michael and his wife Yessenia were at a family event. The two had been married for decades, 25 years the couple were together. Michael's mom, Rita, told KFSN that they had been together since middle school. But here's the thing. For the last 2 months, Yessenia and Michael were separated. We don't know the full extent of what took place last Saturday, but here's what we do know. There was some type of domestic altercation during the event, and it allegedly made Michael furious enough to grab a gun and shoot his wife in front of the couple's kids. Afterwards, Michael took off in his truck. So this wasn't a case of who done it. Police knew who their suspect was. They just needed to find him. He didn't get too far. His truck was found the following day, about 30 miles away. So when deputies responded, they already had a warrant out for his arrest. But according to the Tulare Sheriff's Office, Michael had no intentions of turning himself in or of being arrested. According to the Tulare Sheriff's Office, Michael got out of his truck and just began firing off multiple rounds at the deputies. Then he made a stop on a long stretch of road just outside of Woodlake, California. And here's where the case took another turn. According to the Tulare Sheriff's Office, Michael got out of his truck and just began firing off multiple rounds at the deputies. The deputies fired back, hitting him, and Michael died at the scene. This case has left so many unanswered questions, including why. Here's what else we've learned. When Michael's mother, Rita, spoke to KFSN, she also mentioned that her son couldn't cope with Yessenia filing for divorce. She told the outlet, "My son was the world to me, and their mom was the world to them, and now both families are destroyed." He didn't want to live without his sweetheart. He didn't want to live without his soulmate, the love of his life, and he didn't want her to live without him, so he chose the cowardly way out. Jacob Rocha, the couple's son, told the same news outlet that he misses his mother terribly. He told local reporters, "I just wish I could see her one more time, hold her one more time, tell her I love her, give her a hug. But that man took everything away from us. To be a grandmother to mine and my sister's kids when we get to that point, unfortunately, I'll never get that. And he took that away from us. I wish there was something that could have helped." His sister Kayla said, "She was the light of our world. She shined very bright. She was always there for me and my brother. She was everything to us." We truly have a heartbreaking and tragic case, and I'm joined now by law enforcement instructor Sunny Slaughter. Sunny, thank you so much for joining me today. I got to ask, what's your reaction to this case, especially with this shooting happening in front of the couple's adult children?
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for having me. I am tongue-tied because this case is so very, very painful. And particularly when I read that he did it in front of the children. And, some people say, well, they're adults. Let me tell you, this will impact them for the rest of their lives. They saw their father murder their mother in front of them. The children have already begun speaking out. She was the backbone, the glue of the family. They really depended on her. She was always there to comfort them. They will have PTSD. They will have lifelong trauma, insecure relationships, the stigma of it all. My heart breaks because they lost their entire immediate, not the grandparents, just that cluster right there. Even though their father may not have been a good person, they have lost everything. And it's unconscionable.
And it's horrible, too, because to your point, Sunny, whether or not that they were kids or adult kids, it's all a family unit. And especially to see your father allegedly shoot your mother right in front of you, I just can't even imagine what they're dealing with or going through at this point. And Sunny, as we're learning more details from this case, does any part of you think that this was premeditated? Or do you think that this was really just a spur of the moment, terrible, terrible reaction?
It seems like it was premeditated only because Uh, According to the information that's available to the public, she had filed for divorce approximately 2 months ago. So they were estranged, which means separated, from one another, not necessarily living in the same house, but still communicating. The children are in their very early 20s, very early. So there was a relationship there. And I can't figure out whether they were all together at that time or whether he knew where they were going to be, but he had a plan. He definitely had a plan because he brought the weapon with him with every intention of using it because he did it so callously and quickly in front of the children. And when I say quickly, I'm not saying that he walked up and he did it because I don't know those details. But what I'm saying is he had consciousness of thought and presence of mind to pull out a weapon for someone he loved for 25 years, shoot her in front of his children without hesitation, did not attempt to harm them, and then began to flee. So I think it was a premeditated thought. Even if it was a spur of the moment, he had already thought this out. It had already come to his mind at some point in time that he was not going to let her go.
And it's interesting too, Sunny, because again, as we're kind of learning more details about it from local reports or through the family, I'm kind of speaking out about this case. From what we know so far, it doesn't seem like this was a domestically abusive relationship, if that's making sense. Like, it doesn't seem like there was little tidbits of like dad was allegedly hitting mom or anything that we're learning so far, but it seems to kind of escalate to this point of just going from, what was going to be divorce proceedings to shooting. And, it's not out of the realm of possibility. We see that all the time here at Law&Crime, right? But I'm curious what your thoughts are if you think that there was possibly domestic abuse throughout the relationship, or if just the thought alone of a impending divorce really just kind of really captivated Michael to the point where he really just could not live with the thought of being single again.
So when I was looking for additional details on the case, one of the threads that I read said that he seemed controlling. Like there were things that people knew that she might want to do, but she did not do them because he kind of controlled some of that narrative. So it may not have been the physical violence that was going on, maybe more psychologically, maybe some isolation, and not necessarily, when people think of domestic violence, they think it is like an ongoing violent situation. And that's really not what it is. Domestic violence has waves of highs and lows and calms and erratic behavior. And I think that may have been some of what was going on, which is why people weren't they may have been concerned, but not overly alarmed. And she, according to what I've read, wanted to be free. They had been together since they were, I think, in middle school.
Middle
So
school,
that's
yeah.
25 years, and
Hmm.
and then they had their children, and she may have wanted more freedom because in all of the pictures that I've seen, they did not look angry, but also that can be misleading to people because, like I said, you see people smiling and you think everything is okay, but a smile is not indication of happiness. A
Right.
smile is a smile, and it is not an indication of freedom and peace. So we have to really think about that. And what was his level of mental health? As you said, I think his mother may have said, he couldn't live without her. It is very dangerous when people even think that notion, let alone someone else on the outside can convey it, that if you cannot live without someone, that is dangerous because we think, oh, it's so romantic. But in some instances like this, if that's what he was thinking, that's scary. And he did not want to be apart from her.
Right. And how many times have we seen it in these different cases of just like, why doesn't she leave? Why won't she go? And then we see kind of results like this. And, you know, Sonny, I'm curious, do you agree with the sheriff's office that Michael had ill intentions from the very beginning, in the sense that he was never going to surrender to law enforcement, even though he had a warrant out for his arrest, even though deputies were closing in on him? Do you think that there is also that possibility that he never intended on going with law enforcement, that this was always going to be the outcome?
Absolutely. It is absolutely, which is why when you even reached out and I read the details quickly, I saw this as suicide by cop.
Mm-hmm.
I saw his behavior as not the way it is described of him getting out of the vehicle and taking on law enforcement in such a stance and the way that he did. It is very indicative of that type of behavior and scenario where law enforcement are placed in such a precarious situation that they are having to really think about themselves and their safety and their colleagues' safety before they think about if this is the right thing to do to save this man to get him to trial or this individual. So suicide by cop is one of the things that is really critical that I thought the public must understand, that law enforcement, they put their lives on the line every single day. They have to make snap decisions. And I do not think that he was going to go with law enforcement and it was ill intent. And he was very cowardly, knowing that they were going to have to defend themselves. And that's why he did it in that way. So I absolutely agree with the sheriff. I am deeply concerned about how the officers are feeling right now. And I even posted about the long process that this will have to go through to not only clear the officer, but they are going to need some help themselves. Because it's not, people think, well, this is what they train to do.
Right.
People that are in law enforcement don't train to murder other people. It is something that is a part of the job and can happen. But most of the times, officers don't draw their weapons as often as people might think they do. So they need some serious attention themselves. And I also don't want it to come back where the family doesn't have the answers that they need because of how Michael did this. And he is the perpetrator, not law enforcement, and neither was his wife. She was the innocent direct victim, and now all of this collateral damage based on him.
Right. And now, to your point, that the family is looking, or probably hoping, to have some type of answers to this. And will they ever get them? I think that is still kind of up in the air right now. And in a case like this, was there any way to de-escalate the suspect in this? Was there any way to de-escalate Michael, especially because I'm sure emotions were very heightened, and to your point, he might have already been planning, this is the way I'm going to go out. But is there anything that could have been done differently, or is this kind of a coulda, shoulda, woulda? It couldn't have.
Based on the information that's available to the public and that I was reading, they were in pursuit. And what he did was he returned open fire on them immediately. There was no conversation. There was no let us walk you in. So there was actually no time for de-escalation because they were in pursuit and he immediately turned against against them, and there was nothing left for them to do, which is why I think it's really important for for the public to understand there was no talking him down from him shooting at them.
And I know
They
that
had to take cover. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And it just seems like from the get-go, it was, draw the gun, and then what happens next ended up happening. But, domestic calls in general, from what I've learned, is that they're kind of some of the most dangerous calls for law enforcement to really respond to. Can you explain to me why and what you teach officers when they respond to calls like this?
So when I became a Department of Homeland Security Flexi instructor, that was one of the things that they repeatedly said to us. It was so ingrained in our training that these calls are so serious and so dangerous for law enforcement. And here's some of the reasons why. Because when you're going on the call, you don't know everything. You rely on the 911 call operators to provide you context. Are there weapons in the home? Has police been out there before? Where is the suspect? Where's the victim? Are any other people in the house? So they have to do a lot of situational awareness while they're en route. And then when they get there, these calls can sometimes become really toxic and then turn on law enforcement quickly because in many cases, and well, I should say in some cases, while they're there at the behest of a victim, then sometimes the victims then turn on the officers responding because then they, in turn they realize, oh, I want to protect the offender too. So then you have a dual threat and they don't know what they're walking into, and then they arrive. These more officers lose their lives to responding to domestic violence call than any other call and any other operation that they perform every single day across the United States of America. They are under threat sometimes from victims. They are absolutely under threat from perpetrators. They can get under threat from the community and public scrutiny around these calls. So they lose their lives and they can be attacked. They can, if they go in by themselves, and we tell them never to go in by yourself, to always go two persons in. That way, if you're pinned down, you can then get help from someone else. People know where you are. They have to radio in, but it's a very blind call is what I would say. And when you're blinded by in the pursuit of trying to save someone else and you don't know all of the threats coming at you, then you really put yourselves in harm's way. So we see so many officers. I believe there were more than 500 or 1,000 officers that lost their life to domestic violence or were harmed or injured in these cases response in 1 year. Critical cases, critical time. And I don't think the public appreciates how much law enforcement put their lives on the line when they're doing the right thing.
Yeah. And it goes to show also that I think a lot of people just assume that domestic altercations or domestic violence is just lover spats, but really they can really be extremely dangerous because I mean, how many stories have we covered here where it starts off with domestic altercation, ends up in a murder? But Sunny, my final question to you is, you know, with the suspect dead and the mom gone as well too, what does justice look like for the Rocha family? Like, do you see justice for them, especially with Michael now dead?
I think, that's such a really great question. And Elizabeth, you are always leading with great questions and then ending with ones that really cause people to think.
Yeah.
I say justice becomes convoluted is the word that I would use because there is the narrative for accountability becomes short because you want to hold Michael accountable for his actions against the victim. Yes, I think it's Yessenia. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. And for what he did to the children. But then his the suicide by cop becomes the avoidance of any repercussions in a criminal justice system. So I think justice falls short when you think of going through systems that we understand that can hold perpetrators accountable because he was a coward. So I think the family is now left to their own devices. And so are the family and friends to try to figure out, what did I miss? What was it I could have done differently? And then, and in that lens, I think that's not justice. It is trying to justify what may have been missed without the lens of justice, really executing what it could have in the way of jail time or a sentence for Michael. So this becomes really a sentence for the family, for the law enforcement, and the entire community.
Yeah, it seems like the family was sentenced to a life sentence as opposed to, the actual killer in this case.
Yes.
Sunny Slaughter, beautiful words there. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you so much for joining me, and I appreciate your insight into this case.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
The Visalia Police Department are investigating the shooting of Michael Rocha, and the Reedley Police Department continued their investigation into Yessenia's murder. Thanks so much for joining us here on Law and Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner.